Presidents love the optics of the signing desk. A heavy pen and the swift stroke of a signature project absolute control over the nation's trajectory. But that spectacle hides a much quieter reality. Congress is gridlocked. Passing comprehensive, permanent laws has become nearly impossible in today's polarized climate. To bypass that legislative paralysis, modern presidents lean heavily on executive orders. It is a guaranteed way to signal immediate action to their political base, without having to negotiate with the opposing party. Yet, a stroke of the pen is not a law. While an executive order feels like a sudden, definitive shift, it actually creates a deeply unstable foundation for governance. The immense power of the executive pen is an illusion. Instead of stable, long-term lawmaking, we are left with a system of volatile political whiplash that sets up a direct collision between the state and the people. To understand why this happens, we have to define what an executive order actually is. It is merely an internal directive to the executive branch, and it must be strictly grounded in either Article 2 of the Constitution or an existing statute. There are hard limits to this authority. A president cannot unilaterally order the spending of unappropriated funds, nor can they dissolve entire government agencies by decree, like the U.S. Department of Education. When a president pushes past those limits, the courts step in. Historically, nearly 30% of a president's early-term executive orders face immediate legal challenges that freeze them in their tracks. But the ultimate vulnerability of this tool is political. Because an executive order bypasses the legislature, the very next president can revoke it on their first day in office. Relying on these decrees transforms American governance from a system of enduring legislation into a fragile house of cards, ready to be toppled by the next election cycle. Harvard Kennedy School expert Roger Porter calls this the pendulum effect. With each new administration, national policy violently swings back and forth on a wave of revocations. Instead of slow, incremental progress, this relentless back and forth injects constant, unpredictable policy volatility into the system. While politicians use this volatility to demonstrate they are fighting for their base, the average voter experiences this whiplash as deep structural exhaustion. This exhaustion often metastasizes into future anxiety. For marginalized communities, living under a system where basic civil protections are granted and revoked by decree generates a constant state of threat. This top-down policy pendulum translates directly into psychological distress for vulnerable populations, the lived experience of democratic backsliding. Conventional wisdom assumes that in such a hostile, volatile climate, targeted groups would retreat. The expectation is that they would conceal their identities and disengage from public life entirely. Empirical data shows the exact opposite. A comprehensive 8-year psychological study tracking thousands of LGBTQ+ adults across multiple presidencies reveals a surprising resilience. This dual-axis chart visualizes the study's core finding. As optimism about progressive change plummets, group identification and collective efficacy simultaneously spike upward. Psychologists call this inverse correlation identity vigilance. The widening gap represents a deliberate, defensive consolidation of community. When faced with democratic decline and immediate policy reversals, minoritized groups refuse to retreat into the shadows. Instead, they actively lean into their collective identity. Researchers describe this vigilance as a hydraulic buffer against political whiplash. When the government fails to provide stable rights, marginalized communities substitute that lost institutional stability with a high-investment collective identity. They generate their own internal security. This collective identity acts as a protective shield, buffering the community's mental health against the emotional cost of opposing a hostile government. You can revoke an executive order on day one, but you cannot legislate away the enduring organic strength of a community's defensive solidarity. The president's pen may generate temporary volatility and the illusion of absolute control, but in doing so, it inadvertently catalyzes the unbreakable psychological resilience of the very communities it attempts to govern.